Shalom, everyone. Good evening. This is, what happened to Brian? He disappeared. Oh, well, he'll come back. I am so excited to begin Exodus. It's, just reading it, it's given me so many ideas in relationship to what's happening in the world. And I don't know if you can see what I see, but let's get into reading it together. And if you want to read, just raise the hand and I'll let you do some reading. But let me get in here. What do we got here? Okay, here we
Could
are.
you make it a little bigger?
Yes, I think so. Let me try.
I mean, it's just different than usual.
Zoom in. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah, I get it's just different, but I guess change is okay.
Well, I don't know how different it is because on my side it's exactly the same. And it's very big on my screen. I can only see one verse at a time.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I lost it. Okay. Let me go back. Exodus 1. So we're beginning the book of Exodus. And we begin with the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each coming with his household. Reuben, I was going to say Miriam. Reuben, Simeon, Shimon, Levi, and Judah. Those are the first four children of Leah. Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. The number of persons that were Jacob's issue came to 70. In other words, Jacob's sons and the people who came with him were 70 people who went into Egypt. Joseph was already there. Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. A new king arose over Egypt. It's funny because I always used to say a new Pharaoh arose that did not know Joseph, but it doesn't say Pharaoh. It says a new king. And I was wondering why he would say king and not Pharaoh. Any idea, anybody? Because I was thinking of it the other day, that the king had more to do with the people, but the Pharaoh was more godlike. But I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Anyway, this king said to his people, look, the Israelite people are far too numerous for us. Let's deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us. And it says here, rise from the ground, but really it means and get rid of us, kick us out of our own land. So he had a real fear, this Pharaoh. He was not like the other Pharaoh. So they set taskmasters over them. Oh, I wonder if it says this king, maybe he didn't see himself as much as the Pharaoh before him, who he considered himself a god. I'm not sure. There's so many angles that we can see things.
The Hebrew, that's two different words, one for king and one for Pharaoh.
Yeah. The king says Melech here. Anu, Vayakam, Melech Chadash, a new king, El Mitzrayim of Egypt, who didn't know Joseph. It's funny how we always think, we hear things over and over again, and we just believe, well, that's the way it is. But it isn't always the way it is. That's why it's so important to read the Hebrew. So let us deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground. So he was afraid. He had a natural fear. Why? I don't know why this would come up, but I guess it's all part of God's plan. So many things happen, and we don't always realize why they happen, but so much of it is God's plan to bring a redeemer to Israel and to get us out of Egypt. So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built garrison cities. They built all those, the cities that held the, here it says, store cities, which is what I had heard more for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses.
So here they use Pharaoh.
Yes, here they use, and here it says, et, where does it say Pharaoh? Otam, this is Pithom. Where are we? Yeah, here. Le Pharaoh for Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out, so that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. It's a little bit to me like what's happening right now. It's like there are a lot of Jews living in America and in Canada, and the people around us are becoming more and more. It says they came to dread the Israelites. Um, it's more like a loathing, you know, because God is preparing the soil for what's about to happen. The Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the various labors that they made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made life bitter for them, which with harsh labor at mortar and bricks and all sorts of tasks in the field. But it's interesting, it doesn't say that they built the pyramids. What they did build was the store cities. The king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah. And he said, when you deliver the Hebrew women, look at the birth stool. If it's a boy, kill him. If it's a girl, let her live. So we know why, because the descendancy of the family comes through the male name, not through the female. The midwives, fearing God, did not do as the king of Egypt had told them and let the boys live. You know, that to me is such a powerful statement because they feared God more than man, more than the king of Egypt. Now, they let the boys live. They went against the king. And sometimes I'm afraid to do something because I'm more afraid of what man will say than God. And this is something that we can learn from these midwives. So the king of Egypt summoned the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing, letting the boys live? They were smart. The midwife said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are vigorous. Before the midwife can come to them, they have given birth. They were really on their toes. And God dealt well with the midwives. The people multiplied and increased greatly. And God established households for the midwives because they feared God. So if we're looking for approval from men, from people, we will never find it. But here, because they feared God and they took a chance and they had the courage to stand up for them, look how God blessed them. He established households for the midwives because of it. And then the people continued to multiply and increase. Then Pharaoh ordered all his people, saying, every boy that is born you shall throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. And this reminded me of the expression in Hebrew that says midah keneged midah, measure for measure. When the Pharaoh ordered his people that every male boy would be killed, thrown into the Nile, he didn't realize at that moment that that was exactly what was going to happen in his own family. At the very end of the story, we'll see how his own son died because he wanted, we give what we get. We get what we give. A certain member of the house of Levi went and into the house and took into the house as his wife a woman of Levi. So here, a priest in the house of Levi went and took a woman from the house of Levi. They had to intermarry in their own tribes. The woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw how beautiful he was,
Peggy, I'm sorry. What do you
yeah,
mean they had to intermarry?
well, they were later we'll see, but it was already an understanding in the tribes that you married among your own. You stayed within your tribes.
But they took a man, well, they stayed in their tribe here.
Yeah, exactly. They already knew this. This like it.
Oh, I thought okay, the way you worded it, I thought you're saying they intermarried, but they didn't intermarry.
No, they stayed in their own tribe.
Right, right.
Yeah, which is especially the Levites are where the house of the Kohanim, and later on we're going to see how the Kohanim were told they could only marry the women who were Kohanim because they would understand their role. A lot of this has to do with roles, and we'll see that as we go. So the woman conceived Yocheved and bore a son. And when she saw how beautiful he was, now does it say beautiful? Kitov, how good he was. She hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him anymore, she got a wicker basket, caulked it with pitch, with bitumen, tar, and pitch, just like, this is called a teva. And she put the child in it, and she placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. Now, I always pictured that she put it in the Nile and kind of set it off wherever it would go. But that's not what happened. She put the child in it. She hadn't named it, although I do believe it must have been circumcised and placed. Was Moses circumcised there? I'm trying to remember if he was.
Remember it was, who was it who
It was.
circumcised?
That to
Sephora?
be circumcised.
Who?
The 8 days is past, and it's 3 weeks after.
Yeah, no, it's 3 months.
3 months.
Well, Zipporah, his sons hadn't been circumcised, but I think he was. Yeah, he was circumcised, and placed it. Look, she placed the teva, the basket, among the reeds by the bank of the river. Now, if the basket was inside the reeds, it wouldn't have moved around. So the sister Miriam stationed herself at a distance to learn what happened to him. So it doesn't say, well, she ran after it to see where the basket would go. We always get this idea, maybe from the movies that we watch, that, and that it landed at the feet of Pharaoh's daughter when she went into to bathe. Here it says the daughter came down to bathe in the Nile, while her maidens walked along the Nile. She spied the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to fetch it. So it stayed there. It didn't move. When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying. And she had mercy on it, rachamim, and said, this must be a Hebrew child. So either she knew because of the blanket, she knew because the child was hidden, she knew because he was circumcised. It doesn't say. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle, to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter answered and said, yes. So the girl went and called the mother. Look what the sechel this young girl had. All these things. The interesting thing was I thought of these women, the midwives, and then the courage that Miriam's mother had to put him in a basket. and then Miriam, the things that she said, all these, it's almost like they were fulfilling the role that God gave them, so that at some point Moses could fulfill his. You'll see all the people that had a part to play in Moses fulfilling his role. When we learn our purpose in this world, we'll see how many people helped us along the way to show us to help us fulfill our purpose. So Pharaoh's daughter said to the mother, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. This to me is, only God could do this. I think it's absolutely marvelous, because not only did she get paid for nursing her own child, but at that time, before Moses was brought back to Pharaoh's daughter, it says when the child grew up. So we don't know the age, but the typical time of weaning would have been about 5 years old. And at 5 years old, the character's already developed. Moses would have known exactly who he was. And she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, or Moshe. Here it says Moshe. And here it says Moshe, associated with Masha, which means drawn out. She drew him out of the water. Sometime later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his kinsfolk, to his own people, so he knew who they were, and he saw their labors. And he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own kinsmen. And he turned this way, and Daddy looked around, and seeing that no one was there, he struck the Egyptian, obviously killed him, and he hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, he found two Hebrews fighting. So he said to the offender, "Why do you strike your fellow?" I think he must have already had the understanding that he was put in this position, that he was, maybe Miriam's mother explained things to him. Maybe living in the palace, he understood that he had some kind of a destiny, but here he was trying to do something to save his own people. Maybe he thought, I'm placed in this court so that I can do something. But the man who he was trying to save said, "Who made you chief and ruler over us? Do you mean to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian?" They turned on him. Moses was afraid, and he thought, then the matter is known. And when Pharaoh learned of the matter, he sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled from Pharaoh. See, when we try to do things on our own, it doesn't work. We have to wait for God to open the door, to show us the path. Moses arrived in the land of Midian, and he sat down beside a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water, filled the troughs to water their father's flocks. But the shepherds came and drove them off. They were also shepherds, but they were shepherdesses. But the male shepherds came and drove them off. But Moses, this was innate in him, he rose to their defense and he watered their flock. When they returned to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you've come back so soon today?" So obviously, here Reuel knew that they had to go through these battles every time they went with their flock to the well, because here they came back really quickly. So sometimes, because the male shepherds would come, they would have to wait until they were all finished, and then the women can go, and they obviously couldn't fight them off. So here they answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." So he said to his daughters, "Where is he? Why did you leave the man? Ask him to bring bread." These girls, they had no sechel. They didn't think. He saved them and then they left. I can't even imagine why they wouldn't have thought to invite him home. It says here, Moses consented to stay with the man, but it's not what it says in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew, it says Moses was contented to stay with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah as a wife. So when I saw that Moses was content to be sheltered, literally to be sheltered, the shevet, be sheltered with this man in the same way he had been sheltered the first 40 years of his life in the Pharaoh's court. Now he would be sheltered in the desert with Midian and with Reuel and Jethro, who would be his father-in-law. I think Reuel is another name for Jethro. So he was contented to stay there, and he would be there the next 40 years, where he would learn how to um, lead the people through the desert.
I forgot. These are Midianites.
Those are Midianites. Those are
These
relatives.
Relatives, but these are not Israelites. These are Midianites.
Those are Midianites.
But isn't Zipporah an Israeli name?
No, well,
maybe
we
they're
don't know
related
that.
languages, I think.
Yeah, for sure. They spoke
Semitic
Aramean.
languages.
Yeah, exactly, Semitic languages. But she was the daughter of a Midian priest.
Right.
Remember? But she was very different than the daughter who married Joseph, who was the priest Potipharah of Egypt. Because you don't hear anything about Zipporah's two sons. The first one was Gershom, and she bore a son who he named Gershon, for he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. We hear nothing about her sons because she was obviously more attached to her Midianite way of life, and maybe she never really understood the God of Moses. A long time after that, the king of Egypt died, and so his son took over, who would be about the same age, I guess, as Moses. The Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from the bondage rose up to God. God heard their mourning, and God remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's not that he ever forgot the covenant, but it's time he put his eyes back on them, because it was time for them to get ready to leave, because they had forgotten him. They weren't crying and moaning to go back to the land. They were crying and moaning because they were suffering. You see the same thing today. The people are crying and moaning and suffering in Israel, but you're not hearing cries of returning to God. What we're hearing is cries that we want peace, we want to stop suffering, we want to, we want the hostages back, which of course it's our families. But until our people are crying for God, we will continue to go through these cycles. God looked upon the Israelites, and God took notice of them. It says, Yada, he knew at Bnei Israel, he looked upon Bnei Israel. Yida comes from the word, and God knew them. He was getting ready to build an intimate relationship with his people. Now Moses, tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, he drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. It says here, Malach, an angel of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. Here the bush is called Ha-Seneh. Seneh is where we get the word Sinai. It was a very special bush known as Seneh Alexandrina. That bush grew in the desert, and it looked like it was red leaves, and it could combust. It could naturally go into a fire. This happens even to today. A blazing fire out of the bush. Moses looked at it, and the bush was all aflame, but the bush was not consumed. It was continually burning. And Moses said, I must go and see this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up? He wasn't afraid of it. He didn't run away from it. He wanted to see. When God saw, when Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh saw that he turned aside to look, in other words, that he wasn't afraid, he didn't run away as he had run away before, God called to him out of the bush, Moshe, Moshe. And Moshe answered, Hineni, here I am. I love that phrase, here I am. And how many times have I said it? And yet there were times, even though I've said, Hineni, God, use me to help what's going on in the world. There are times when I forgot my Hineni, when I become afraid for various reasons. God said, do not come closer. Do not approach. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. I don't know why the idea of removing your sandals because you're on holy ground. Maybe God wanted him to completely, maybe this is a new age thought, completely connect to the ground, to the earth. Any ideas why you think? Because I know that, sorry, Miriam?
Well, I think it's just to know that it's like anything could become sacred if God makes a special point of being connected to it. And like, even believe it or not, when people talk about the holy chalice, like, I'm not saying I believe all of that, but it's taking something that's usually ordinary and saying this is special. When you go into a king's court, you would take off your sandals. It's recognizing the sacred and the profane, like this is sacred. It's different from the usual. And God has made it that, not that that particular ground was special, but God's special presence there required an act as if, you're entering the palace of a king.
Yes, that sounds, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And he continued, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. I don't blame him. I don't know what would happen if that happened to me. And Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh continued, I have seen the plight of my people in Egypt, and I have heeded their outcry because of their taskmasters. And yes, I am mindful of their sufferings. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, which is presently occupied. Remember, look who are the occupiers. God is giving us a land that is occupied. The Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The land belongs to God. And these were all pagan, ultra pagan nations. And God wanted them out of that land, and he would bring his people, who he would set free from those gods that they all worshiped, into this land, flowing with milk and honey. Now the cry of the Israelites has reached me. And not only that, I have seen how the Egyptians are oppressing them. So come, and I will send you to Pharaoh. You shall free my people, the Israelites, from Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt? God said, I will be with you. That will be your sign that it was I who sent you. When you have freed the people from Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. He already was telling Moses that he was going to bring him back to Mount Sinai, to this mountain where we would stand before him. Moses said to God, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And that's where it says, God said to Moses, Echyeh asher echyeh. Continuing, thus shall you say to the Israelites, Echyeh sent me to you. Now that has been translated as I am that I am, but that's not what it means. What it means is it, and I'm going to explain it in further detail on Shabbat, but I got it from the book by Uriel ben Mordechai, who speaks about how um, it's in a future tense. The Hebrew is in a future tense. I shall be who I shall be who, but it's a type of thing, the type of grammatical Hebrew where it's I was, I am, and I will always be. So those are the words that he used. He wasn't trying to prove the pre-existence of what they say that this is points to the pre-existence of Jesus and Christianity. It has nothing to do with that. And I recommend this book called "If the End of the Messianic Lie," and he explains these things in much more detail. God said further to Moses, "Thus shall you speak to the Israelites. Yud He Vav He, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This shall be my name forever. This is my appellation. This is my name for all eternity. Yud He Vav He. Go, assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, Yud He Vav He, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I have taken note of you and what is being done to you in Egypt. And I have declared, I will take you out of the misery of Egypt and bring you to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. I will bring you to a land flowing with milk and honey. You know, we have forgotten this today. We as a people have forgotten where we come from. We're not telling this to our children. We're not passing this information down. This is what we need to know. They will listen to you. Then you shall go with the elders of Israel to the king of Egypt, and you shall say to them, see, he wasn't going alone. God would be with him. The elders would be with him. Aaron would be with him. And you shall say to him, Yud He Vav He, the God of the Hebrews, became manifest to us. He appeared to Moses, and he will appear to them. Now, therefore, let us go a distance of 3 days into the wilderness to make an offering to our God, Yud He Vav He. But I know that the king of Egypt will let you go only because of a greater might. So I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with various wonders. Here he already knows that it's going to take a huge, huge miracle, only a sign of greater power than they have. Because right now they were the power. They were the ones holding us as slaves. But he would stretch out his hand and he would destroy Egypt with various wonders. These would be the 10 plagues that he would bring upon them. After that, he will let you go. And I will dispose the Hebrews favorably toward the people, so that when they let you go, you will not go away
I will
empty-handed.
dispose the Egyptians favorably.
What did I say?
Hebrews.
Oh yeah, of course. I will dispose the Egyptians favorably toward this people, meaning the Hebrews, so that when you go, you will not go away empty-handed. And you'll see later, he's telling us everything that he's going to do in advance. Each woman shall borrow from her neighbor, and the lodger in her house objects of silver and gold and clothing, and you shall put these on your sons and daughters, thus stripping the Egyptians. And believe it or not, this is also a future prophecy that we see when the nations pour their wealth into Israel in the last days when God is reigning over Israel. But Moses spoke up and said, "What if they don't believe me? What if they don't listen to me?" But say, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh did not appear to you. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to him, "What's that in your hand?" And he replied, "A rod." God said, "Cast it on the ground." And he cast it on the ground, and it became a snake. And Moses recoiled from it. Then Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Moshe, "Put out your hand and grasp it by the tail." He put out his hand and he seized it, and it became a rod again in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, did appear to you. The Lord said to him further, "Put your hand in your bosom. Put your hand in your robe." He put his hand in his bosom. When he took it out, his hand was encrusted with snowy scales. This was exactly the same thing that happened to Miriam. The same type of white. It's almost like this was, and the word is mi tsarat. The tsarat that she got, he got right here for not trusting in God. And God said, "Put your hand back in your bosom." So he put his hand back into his bosom, and when it took it out, there it was again, all healed like the rest of his body. And if they don't believe you or pay heed to the first sign, they will believe the second. And if they are not convinced by both of these signs and still do not heed you, take some of the water from the Nile, pour it on dry ground, and the water that you take from the Nile will turn to blood on the dry ground. Again, telling him in advance what he's going to do. So Moses himself is learning how to trust God, because you see how he goes back and forth. On one hand, he attacks the guard who killed one of, or was hitting one of his people, and then he ran away. He was afraid. On one hand, he when he ran to the Midianites and he saw the daughters at the well, on one side, he was brave enough to um, uh, uh, um, chase away the shepherds, but content to stay in the home, to be safe, to be sheltered. On one hand, he was, brave enough to approach the fire, but he goes back and forth like we all do. This was our great Moses. There are no heroes in the Bible. We all have this. One moment we're brave, and the next moment we're cowering in fear. And Moses said to God, "Please, my Lord, I've never been a man of words, either in times past or now that you have spoken to your servant. I'm slow of speech. I don't think quickly. I'm slow of tongue. I'm not quick to come up with answers." And the Lord said to him, "Who gives humans speech? Who makes them dumb or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh?" So we see God does everything. He's with us no matter what. When we're dumb or we're deaf, he's there. When we see or we're blind, he's there. Now go, and I will be with you as you speak, and will instruct you what to say. But Moses continues. He does. Remember, the rabbi used to call him the reluctant leader. I totally get it. "Please, my Lord, make someone else your messenger, not me." And Lord, at this point, he became angry with Moses and said, "Here is your brother Aaron, the Levite. He's coming. He, I know, speaks readily. He's not afraid. He's an extrovert. You're Moses, an introvert. But Aaron, he can speak. And even now he's setting out to meet you. He'll be happy to see you." So obviously he had spoken to Aaron and told him to meet him out in the desert, which to me was amazing because how did he leave Egypt if they were slaves? Could they have all gone out at that point? But anyway, he left. "You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with you and with him as you speak, and tell both of you what to do. And he shall speak for you to the people. Thus he shall serve as your spokesman, with you playing the role of God to him." What does it say here? Playing the role of God. That to me is amazing. You know, a lot of my message on Shabbat has to do with our roles. And we can see how God gives so many of us a role. Shifra and Pua, the midwives, had a role. The sister of Miriam, Moses' sister, had a role. His mother had a role. Aaron has a role. Moses has a role. Each of us has a purpose, whether it's small, 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 like the midwives, or big, like Moses, who would be the savior of Israel, of his people, setting us free. "Take this rod with you, with which you shall perform the signs." People look for signs. They would recognize the signs. Moses went back to his father-in-law, Jethro, and said to him, "Let me go back to my kinsfolk in Egypt and see how they are faring." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go with peace. Lech l'shalom." And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Return to Egypt, for all those who sought to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons, mounted them on a donkey, went back to the land of Egypt, and Moses took the rod of God with him. The Lord said to Moses, "When you return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the marvels that I have put within your power. I, however, will stiffen, will make his heart so proud that he will not let the people go." And there's a reason for that. But here, you see, it's not Moses performing the miracles, but God does it through us. And sometimes things will happen to people around us that are miracles. I just heard a wonderful miracle today. I'll tell you about it soon. "Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Israel is my firstborn son." He's very clear that his people are his firstborn son. Israel is my firstborn son. Pharaoh would understand that because he had a firstborn son. "And I have said to you, let my son go, that he may worship me, that he may revere me, that he may honor me. Yet you refuse to let him go. Now I will slay your firstborn son." So he's telling him. He didn't do it without Pharaoh knowing. He told him exactly what he was going to do. Sometimes we don't hear. We're not listening. At a night encampment along the way, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh encountered him, meaning Moses, and sought to kill him. So Zipporah took a flint and cut off. She circumcised her sons and touched his legs with it, saying, "You are truly a bridegroom of blood to me." So here is this Midianite woman who knew that God was angry with her because Moses hadn't circumcised his own sons. We can go into a whole thing about what all the rabbis say about that, But that's something, if you're interested, you can look that up yourself. There's a lot of information out there on that. When God let him alone, she added, a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision. So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh said to Aaron, go to meet Moses in the wilderness. He went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Imagine how happy he was to see his brother after all those years. He had been gone 40 years. He was now 80. Moses told Aaron about all the things that the Lord had told to him, and all the signs about which he had been instructed. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. And Aaron repeated all the words that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had spoken to Moses, and he performed the signs in the sight of all those assembled. So he repeated the things that he had shown Moses already. And the elders were convinced. All those who were gathered there, they saw. And when they heard that the Lord had taken note of the Israelites and that God had seen their plight, they bowed low, or bowed in homage. Afterwards, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may celebrate a festival for me in the wilderness. But
Why
Pharaoh,
at this point, they want to go, they don't want to just celebrate a festival. How come they're asking just that? Like they want to go, they want to leave Egypt. Why are they asking, that they may celebrate a festival for me? You know why? I don't understand why.
well, what was coming up would be the introduction of the first festivals that God gave us. This would be Pesach. So God already knew what we would do. He already knew that Pharaoh would not let them go, but he was doing it in stages. Let my people go that they may worship me, that they must celebrate. Let's see, what does it say? Shalach et ami, my people. Yahugu li moed bamidbar. What is this word here? Sorry, hang on, let me just see what the word is here. It says to hold a feast, to make a pilgrimage, to celebrate. That they would hold a feast. I don't know, Miriam. I don't have the answer to that, but I would think that it would be he already knew that Pharaoh wouldn't let him go, but he was going to say, let's take it in stages. Let my people go that they may celebrate a festival for me in the wilderness. But Pharaoh said, who is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh that I should listen to him and let Israel go? I do not know Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, because he considered himself to be a god, nor will I let Israel go. They answered, the God of the Hebrews has become manifest to us. He's shown himself to us. Let us go, we pray, a distance of 3 days into the wilderness to give an offering to our God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, lest he strike us with pestilence or sword. So here it looks like the Hebrews were afraid that if they couldn't go, God would strike them. Isn't that what it looks like here? Let us go, we pray, a distance of 3 days into the wilderness to give an offering to our God, lest God strike us with pestilence or sword.
It
I don't,
almost sounds like paganism.
yeah,
Yet an angry God is gonna, they're surrounded by sacrifices and other gods,
yeah,
with the Egyptian people. Even the idea before when they say, who shall we say sent us, or that part. The idea of God's having a name is really a pagan thing. So there's still like, who shall we say? Like, it's still like the idea that which God should we say sent us? Like, it's a pagan idea still. Like, there's still seem to be influenced by that idea.
Very much so, and he had to get them out. Here it says, lest he fall upon us with pestilence. Moses and Aaron wanted to say, lest he fall upon thee, but they showed respect to royalty. That's what Ibn Ezra says. Lest he fall upon us. That makes sense to me. Let's see, that's Ramban, Ibn Ezra.
All right, could you read what he said again?
Yeah,
What you said, that makes sense to me.
I will. Yeah, let me see what this. Upon us includes us Israelites, also you, Pharaoh, and all the Egyptians. When Pharaoh saw that swarms of animals came and devoured many Egyptians. Let me go back to the other one. What it says here, Ramban they said, for you, lest he fall upon us includes us Israelites, also you, Pharaoh, and all the Egyptians. When Pharaoh saw that swarms of animals came into, no, this is not what I just said. Sorry. Yeah, Moses and Aaron wanted to say to Pharaoh, lest he fall upon you, like lest God strike you with pestilence or sword, but they showed respect to the royalty. That's what he says it is, what this means. En tout cas. But the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you distract the people from their tasks? Get on with your work. And Pharaoh continued, the people of the land are already so numerous, and you would have them cease from their labors? That same day, Pharaoh charged the taskmasters and overseers of the people, saying, you shall no longer provide the people with straw for making bricks, as you did before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves, but impose upon them the same quota of bricks as they have been making before this time. Don't reduce it, for they are shirkers. That's why they're crying out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let heavier work be laid upon those involved. Let them keep at it and not pay attention to deceitful promises. So the taskmasters and overseers of the people went out and said to the people, thus says Pharaoh, I will not give you any straw. You must go and get the straw for yourselves, wherever you can find it, and there will be no decrease whatsoever in your work. Then the people scattered through the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. And the taskmasters pressed them, saying, you must complete the same work assignment each day as when you had straw. But the overseers of the Israelites, whom Pharaoh's taskmasters had set over them, were beaten. Why, they asked, did you not complete the prescribed amount of bricks either yesterday or today as you did before? Then the overseers of the Israelites came to Pharaoh and cried, why are you dealing with us like this, with your servants? No straw is issued to your servants, yet they demand of us to make the same amount of bricks, and your servants are being beaten when the fault is with your own people. He replied, you are lazy or shirkers. That's why you say, let us go and sacrifice to God. Be off now to your work. No straw shall be issued to you, but you must produce your quota of bricks. Now the overseers of the Israelites found themselves in trouble because of the order. You must not reduce your daily quantity of bricks. As they left Pharaoh's presence, they came upon Moses and Aaron standing in their path, and they said to them, may the Lord look upon you and punish you for making us loathsome for Pharaoh and his courtiers, putting a sword in their hands to slay us. And Moses returned to Yud-Heh-Vav and said, "O Lord, why did you bring harm upon this people? Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has dealt worse with his people, and still you have not delivered your people." Then the Lord said to Moses, "You shall soon see what I will do to Pharaoh. He shall let them go because of a greater might. Indeed, because of a greater might, he shall draw them from his hand, from this land." So we see that sometimes things look so bad, and we can become so discouraged, and we think we're doing the right things, and things just keep getting worse and worse and worse. But God always has a plan, and he makes things work out for the best. So I love this book of Exodus. Any comments? Well, I guess we give our comments as we go. But I don't have too much to summarize right now because I don't want to give too much away from my message for Shabbat, because I'll be speaking on this portion for Shabbat. Have anything to say before we close, Miriam?
Pretty much said it as we went along.
Okay.
It's hard sometimes, because we can't see the future. When we go through hard times, we can't forget that hard times don't necessarily mean we're being punished, or sometimes there might be some of that, the consequences of our actions, but it doesn't always mean that.
Maybe God is trying to get our attention. He looks for ways to get our attention, many of them, like he went into a burning bush. Maybe that's what he's trying to do in California right now, get the attention of the people.
Yeah.
Yes, Brian,
I gotta cut down my salt.
we all have to cut down our salt.
I
God's
got
trying to get your attention, eh?
it.
Yeah. I got to cut down my sugar. We all have to do something. Jerry, any final words?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic that we're reading this. Many people in the synagogues, they do the Hebrew and they don't read it, and people thought that Moses was placed in the water, like you see in the movies, the Ten Commandments, and that's where you got that from. So the reading is fantastic, and the
What's
other
the
thing,
davening?
pardon?
What's davening?
Yeah, when you're davening, you're not paying attention as much to the reading, like and
Exactly.
especially you have one person is reading the Torah to the people, and many times in Hebrew, or maybe always in Hebrew, so the people don't really read it. This is fantastic. The other thing is with taking off the shoes as a point of respect. I mean, first of all, the shoes in those days, they had the sandals, and they're in deserts, so they were not clean, and maybe maybe this I'm just throwing in, maybe they wash their feet as well, wash their hands and their feet. You've seen that in some movies where they wash their hands and their feet. I'm not saying they wash their feet, but today in many Orthodox synagogues, when the Kohanim bless the people, they do take off their shoes as well. I'm not sure if you were. So it's a sign of respect. They're standing in a holy place, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I find that it's so important. And every time we read through these same portions, look, we've been reading them in this community for what, 37 years? 1993. What are we now? 2025. A lot of years we've been reading these portions every year. And every year something, all of a sudden, I see something new. And there's so much more to learn. I'm still a beginner. When I
There
look
was a rabbi who asked me if I was davening. I was
praying,
today.
davening means praying. So one of the
Um,
things you can do is you can pray that you won't want to eat salt so much. That God would help you to stay away from the salt. And then you have play your part and he'll play his. And you know, it's these stories that God gives us from the Torah, the stories of the people help us to have courage, help us to get through tough times because we see what they went through. And if they could go through this and they were rewarded by God, were saved by God, were protected by God. We're not speaking to people who don't believe in God because they won't hear or see anything. And that's it's not a prejudice, it's just a fact. It says that in the Torah, you have eyes to hear and you cannot hear. You have eyes to see, but you cannot see. You have ears to hear, but you cannot hear. But God is the one who opens our eyes. He's the one who called Moses. He's the one who appeared to Moses and said, I am the God of your fathers. And in some way, he did the same thing with us. And we need to tell these stories to those who would listen. If we told these stories to our children, if everyone in the world told these stories and raised our children with the Torah, what a different world it would be. The Torah is not just for Jewish people. It wasn't given to us to keep for ourselves. It was given to us so that we could be like Moses, a messenger to the nations, to the rest of the world, and to live by these things that we learn in the Torah. If we did this, no enemy would be able to survive, would be able to attack us. He would be our protector and our shield. He says it. Richard, do you have anything you want to add? All right. Well,
No, I don't, but thank you very much.
you're welcome.
we have ways to make you talk.
Yeah, we've got ways to make you talk.
We have ways to make you talk. All right. Thank you,
All right.
everybody, for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you, Peggy.
Keep praying for each other. Yeah. All I can say is keep reading, read the Torah. Anybody watching it, just read it. Even if you don't think you understand, every time you read it, a little light will go off and you'll see more and more.
So you
So
have
thank
Mark
you.
open reading Saturday?
Pardon? You're doing the reading on Shabbat, yes.
You send it in the so-called which parts I'm reading?
I send it in your email. You'll be able to read it and you can practice it. We read it tonight. All right. If you need any help pronouncing some of the names, just let me know. You can call me and I'll help you with the names of the sons. Because in the first portion, the first Aliyah, we're going to read the names of the sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, all those names. Okay, so try to learn them.
The name
Practice
of
a
the
little.
12.
Practice them a little bit. If you don't know how, you call me and let me know.
Okay.
Okay. Nighty night. Shabbat
Thank
shalom.
you. Shabbat shalom.
You're welcome. Bye.